So exercise 20, anatomy of the heart. Uh, this diagram here shows the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. You want to know what side of the heart feeds which circuit. The left side of the heart receives freshly oxygenated blood from the lungs, from the pulmonary circuit, and the left side of the heart pumps that oxygenated blood into the systemic circuit to feed the tissues of the body. Once the blood returns from the tissues of the body, is now deoxygenated, so your returning systemic circuit is deoxygenated blood, which returns to the right side of the heart, and the right side of the heart then pumps that deoxygenated blood back into the pulmonary circuit to pick up oxygen. So the left side feeds the systemic circuit, and the right side feeds the pulmonary circuit. When you look at the thickness of the walls of the two sides, the left is much thicker than the right, and the left side generates much higher pressures than the right. This is due to the fact that your lungs are right next to the heart. You don't need much pressure to move the blood that far, but when you consider the left side, the farthest part of your systemic circuit is to your big toe, your left side has to pump blood all the way to the extremities, and you're looking at a vast pressure difference. So you should know the basics of what you see here. Now, arteries, we're skipping ahead a little bit, but remember, arteries leave the heart, veins return to the heart. Now, usually we think of arteries as having oxygenated blood, but that is only systemic arteries. In this case, the pulmonary arteries have deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary veins have oxygenated blood, which is returning back to the heart from the lungs, whereas the systemic veins have deoxygenated bloods. So just because they're red and blue in the diagrams, don't think that means artery versus vein. Artery is away from the heart, regardless of the oxygen level of the blood that it is carrying. So this diagram, kind of an anterior lateral view of the heart. You should be able to basically identify all the structures that you see here. Big things to think of are the chambers, which we'll see more in an internal view. But here you want to know kind of the atria versus the ventricle. You can definitely see a difference in the two. With the atrium on the anterior, or the external surface of the atrium, you see a structure called the auricle, the auricle. Auricle literally is like ear flap. It's a little flap-like structure that you see on a relaxed heart on the external surface of the atria. The ventricle is, or the ventricles are mostly what you think of as the heart itself, the large heart muscle. The atria are just receiving chambers. The ventricles are the very muscular pumping chambers. The ventricles are what generate the blood pressure. The atria are there just to receive and to increase the filling efficiency of the ventricles. So again, know your plumbing in and out. So deoxygenated systemic blood coming in the right side of the heart from the inferior and superior vena cavas. You also have the coronary circuit, which we'll see on the next slide or two, that feeds the muscle of the heart itself. The heart does not utilize the oxygen from the blood that passes through it. It is merely a mechanical pump in that sense. Also pumping back out the right side of the heart, you see the pulmonary trunk splits into the left and right pulmonary arteries as they travel to the left and right lungs. Blood returning back from the heart is oxygenated on the right and left pulmonary veins. You have two of each, two right and two left. They come into the left atria, and the left ventricle pumps that oxygenated blood out to the systemic circuit through the aorta. Right here you have two, you can really technically probably say three parts of the aorta. The ascending aorta is the first inch or two as the aorta travels straight up. The aortic arch is where that ascending aorta takes a 180-degree turn and then turns into the descending aorta as it goes back down. The three vessels that you see on the top of the aortic arch, we will know before the end of this exercise, but those are your three aortic arch vessels. So again, posterior view, the left atria you see there with the 2 right and 2 left pulmonary veins entering in. You start to see the beginning of the descending aorta, even though it's not labeled here. The descending aorta descends through the thorax and the abdomen. Again, you've got the SVC and IVC, the vena cava, feeding into the right atrium, and there you can actually see the coronary sinus, which is the other small circuit that we don't typically talk about, but it is kind of a subset of the systemic circuit. It is the coronary circuit that feeds the musculature of the heart itself. And again, the right pulmonary artery and left pulmonary artery. You don't see the trunk in this view. That is an anterior structure, but you should be able to identify everything that you see on this diagram here. So take kind of a coronal section through the heart, or through parts of the heart anyways, and you'll see something like this. Again, you look at that smaller diagram on the upper right, you can see that the left ventricle is much thicker and stronger, and really the right ventricle is almost an accessory to the left ventricle. It does just kind of hang on the side of the left ventricle, but the left ventricle by and large much larger, much stronger, much thicker myocardial layer as well. Again, be able to identify everything you see here, as well as valves. So we have the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. That you actually don't see the aortic semilunar valve, but the pulmonary and aortic valves are semilunar valves. They are between the ventricles and the aorta or pulmonary trunk, and the two AV valves, atrioventricular valves, are the bicuspid and tricuspid valve. The bicuspid is often called your mitral valve, and that is on the left side, and the tricuspid valve is on the right side. The other structures you want to know are the papillary muscles and the chordae tendineae, the tendinous cords that attach the AV valves to the musculature of the ventricles. And when ventricles contract, these cords prevent the valves from turning inside out and allowing the backflow of blood. The other structure you see here are the tuberculae carneae, those large ridges within the ventricles of the heart. These allow passage of the electrical current, so they are almost very electrical in their sense, but they give this very rough looking interior texture to the ventricles. Again, a surface view of the heart. You have the part of the pulmonary trunk cut away, so you can see the left coronary artery. But this is the coronary circuit, which kind of is a subset of the systemic circuit. The first two small vessels right off the aorta, right just past the aortic semilunar valve, are the right coronary artery and left coronary artery. The right coronary artery goes around the right atrium and splits off into the right marginal branch. And again, I think there's one more here than what your textbook actually has. I will only hold you to what your textbook has. If you look at your lab manual, if you look at table 20.1 on page 249 of your lab manual, you have the right coronary artery, the right marginal artery or right marginal branch, and the posterior interventricular artery. You want to know those three. For the left coronary artery, the first branch that you have there is the circumflex branch that kind of like the parts of the RCA, it goes to the posterior of the heart, and then the other big branch of the left coronary artery is the anterior interventricular artery. So you see the anterior interventricular artery there, and on the next slide you will see the posterior interventricular artery, as well as part of the right marginal branch of the right coronary artery. So know the right and left coronary arteries and their two major branches. Again, the right coronary artery has got the right marginal and the posterior IV artery. The left coronary artery has the circumflex and the anterior IV artery. Just kind of a refresher as to the structure of cardiac muscle when you look at it microscopically. Very branched. This is to help to spread the electrical connection. Again, remember that cardiac muscle is specialized to help spread the electrical transmission that precedes the contraction. When you think about the heart, it has to contract in unison all at once. Anything less than that, it decreases the efficiency of the heart, and so the heart has these structures that again kind of help to spread that electrical circuit or the electrical signals so that a heart contracts as one unit. The intercalated discs are one structure. If you remember, they are large groups of gap junctions that allow the ions to pass from one cell to another. The other thing you see again is the branching that you see on a cardiac muscle cell. The other thing, I don't have a diagram here of, but if you look at page 250 in exercise 20, figure 20.4, the muscles of the ventricles of the heart, they do spiral around in kind of a figure 8 pattern, again to kind of increase the efficiency of the contraction of the heart. The contraction starts at the apex of the heart and works its way towards the base of the heart. Again, the apex is that downward facing point, and the apex is the top part where all the vessels enter and leave the heart. It should make sense that the heart contracts from the bottom up, from the apex towards the base. It's kind of like squeezing a tube of toothpaste from the bottom up to efficiently empty it. If you squeeze a toothpaste tube from the top down, you're not emptying that toothpaste tube very efficiently, and you've got a lot of blood stuck down at the bottom. So it should kind of make sense as well. So in addition to what you see here, you should know everything that you see in exercise 20. Most of the heart diagrams that I just showed you on this slide are repeats of what you see on page 246 and 247. The other thing I did not mention are the 3 layers: the epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Those are on the diagrams that you've seen as well, as mentioned on page 245. And you see those on page 247 on the coronal section of the heart. So you should know those. You should know the 4 chambers, be able to identify those. The 4 valves, identify those by name and whether they are on the right side or the left side of the heart. And basically you should be able to trace a drop of blood from the pulmonary circuit through the left side of the heart, out through the systemic circuit, back into the right side of the heart, and back into the pulmonary circuit, telling me the order that you run into the valves, chambers, and pulmonary or systemic arteries and veins. So you should be able to trace a drop of blood through both circuits and through the heart, and be able to tell me what the order of the structures that you come into contact with if you were that drop of blood.